March Madness. No, I'm not talking about college basketball. This is still a hockey show. But there's simply no other way to describe the current state of the NHL and its playoff races right now. In one conference, you have two Canadian teams on fire and locking down the wildcard spots, while absolute chaos and controversy between the next two teams and the Jackets and Islanders just took center stage last night. And in the other conference, you have two more Canadian teams clashing on the outside looking in, chasing the hottest team in hockey as St. Louis continue to piece together one of the most impressive midseason turnarounds we've seen in a while. So buckle up, grab your popcorn, and enjoy the show because we're back to discuss all of this mayhem and then some today. With that, welcome into Top Shelf presented by Skyscanner. Levi Smith back in the host chair, joined by Matisz, Cushman. We can get right into it, guys. We have a ton to talk about. The playoff races that we're seeing unfolding in the NHL right now is all time. Like, it's incredible. And it starts with, like I said, last night, we had that crazy saga between the Blue Jackets Islanders. Is it a goal? Is it not a goal? What were your takeaway from that?
Yeah, it was, 3-3 with 10 seconds left. So this is massive for the Islanders who, as an aside, the reason that this is so important to them is because they've kind of their season's gone down the toilet at certain points in the season. So, a lot of blame on their side, regardless of what you think of the goalie interference. But, yeah, Kyle Palmieri goes near the goalie. There's a bit of a bump there around the blue paint. So that's one layer of it. Does the goalie have time to reset? Kind of debatable, but I think he has time to reset. Mm-hmm. So it's really difficult. And the one really important factor here is that it was called a no goal on the ice. So that means that the Situation Room in Toronto has to find, evidence, hard evidence that we should overturn this. It's sort of like you're working back from, okay, it's a no goal. How do we convince ourselves, so to speak, that this is a good goal, knowing what we know and the original call? So I felt like the backlash and the way that the Islanders reacted very harshly to it. And it's emotional. It's that time of year. But I feel like that didn't quite match how much of a gray area this call actually was, and how, there's a strong argument for it being goalie interference, right? So it's that time of year, man, where it's just the quotes are coming hot and heavy in a good way for us. It's entertaining. Yeah. People getting really emotional and fired up over these types of calls, and the refs making headlines because people don't seem to care about them until this time of year, right?
No, exactly.
So was it a goal or not a goal?
I think if we take away the whole no goal on the ice thing, if it's just clean slate, I say it's a goal.
Yeah. I think, and it's not just like this in hockey, but the whole call on the ice, or like the original call, it's so, the fact that that's kind of the that's what you go by still, it doesn't always make sense to me, because the reason it's getting reviewed is because the refs couldn't see it properly in the first place. So why are we kind of honoring that when we have a full review system that's supposed to negate that? It doesn't exactly make sense to me. So, yeah, talk about a stir-up, though. And those two teams jockeying for the wild card spots right below the Habs, who, they've been on fire. It's been awesome to watch. But I want to get into the wraparound. We're going to talk more about this stuff. And I'm going to start with you, John, and ask you, we're kind of past the deadline now. Obviously, we've talked about the last couple shows, but it's just nice to reflect and see how everything's kind of come to light. And my first question is, which deadline acquisition, do you think was the biggest overpay?
At this moment in time, and this can obviously change, but I think it's Scott Laughton in Toronto. So the trade was Laughton comes to Toronto with a 4th and a 6th for a top 10 protected pick in the next in the 2027 draft, and also Nikita Grabenkin, who's kind of a Scott Laughton light at this point in his career. So the issue with this is that Laughton has 0 points in 8 games. The last game he played under 10 minutes. He's definitely in the bottom 6 and kind of leaning more towards potentially a 4th line role. So that's tough to swallow if you're Brad Treliving. And also, I wonder if there's a disconnect between Brad Treliving and Craig Berube, the coach, where it's like, the GM acquires this player who is obviously supposed to be on the 3rd line, and at certain points so far, he's ended up on the 4th line.
Yeah.
And obviously the context of all this is that Scott Laughton was a Flyer for life. It's obviously going to be difficult to transition to a new team. He's coming to his hometown team, which, has its pros and cons, right? More pressure, everyone's kind of asking you for tickets. There's, this whole childhood dream that you're living out that, if it doesn't go well in the first couple games, maybe things snowball. He had his father-in-law die recently. He became a dad recently this season. So there's just a lot going on there. So, I'm hesitant to sort of say, oh, the Leafs completely dropped the ball here. But at this moment, 8 games in, given the package for that for that acquisition, I think it was certainly an overpayment.
Yeah, I think. What would you say, Kyle?
Yeah, it's tough when you have the 8 games and it's the 000 stat line, and I think it's like a -5 or whatever on the plus minus. But I still think Scott Lawn is a really good fit overall on that Leafs team. As you mentioned, there's a lot going into his just transition to that team. I also think Craig Berube hasn't helped him at all. No. Going third line, left wing, fourth line, third line, changing his role a bunch. He's got to get situated, and I think he will. Another factor there as well is that they have him at 50% retained for 2 playoff runs, which when you look at the trade being a future first-round pick and like a C+, B- at best prospect, I think it's a pretty reasonable price when it's Scott Laughton at Scott Laughton's level. He hasn't been at that right now. I almost look to some trades like Brian Dumoulin going for a second-round pick and another kind of like C+ prospect as being a bit of a surprise. Anthony Beauvillier went for a second-round pick as well. Some of those like second-tier trades that surprised a little bit, but among the first-round pick trades, Scott Laughton is the one that we're still waiting to see kind of hit his gear with his new team.
Yeah, this can definitely turn around. I mean, he's going to be at $1.5 million next year as well. Like
that's a big
they retained,
factor.
Right? So
that's a big factor.
Even if he ends up as your fourth-line center, I mean, with the cap rising, like that's peanuts. $1.5 million. He's a veteran. He's in his 30s. He's very well liked within the room. So like, there's a lot to like there if he starts trending in the right direction on the ice. But we just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note too. I mean, it's not his fault the Leafs paid what
No.
they paid to get it. Like they could have figured out a different package and stuff. And obviously he's been a bit disappointing, but at the end of the day, it's Scott Laughton. Like, you're not about to get a 40 goal score or something in return. So I'm fine with them just seeing it through and seeing how it goes out. But if you're thinking about heading down to Toronto as the Leafs gear up for a final push at the #1 spot in the Atlantic Division, don't forget to use Skyscanner to cash in on flights, hotels, and everything in between. Link in bio for more on that. Shifting gears a bit here, I want to talk about another team that made a giant splash at the deadline, or a little bit before the deadline, in the New York Rangers. A bit of a miserable season.
Disaster
for the Rangers. And even us, like, we were on the show not too long ago saying, this should be that second wildcard team. They've got all the pieces. I don't see why they get in, or why they wouldn't get in over like the Habs, who are young and fun. But obviously those two teams have gone in completely opposite directions. So my question for you, Kyle, is do you think Chris Drury misplayed his hand this season as the Rangers GM?
This is a tough one because I think you can make a case for yes, but I'm going to say no, actually. Where I look at just the job that the general manager has done this season, where things go off the rails, you find a way to get out of the Jacob Trouba contract. I think that's an overall positive for the long-term outlook of the franchise, just getting off of that money. You go out and you bring in a JT Miller, where even if it doesn't help turn the season around this year, I think it makes the team better going forwards. And so, yes, has it been a disaster season? Of course. But I don't think going into the year when a lot of people, myself included, had the Rangers as a favorite to come out of the Eastern Conference and go to the Stanley Cup final, that Mika Zibanejad would have as terrible a year as he has. That Chris Kreider would have 4 assists after having a monster season last year. Some of those factors I don't think are Chris Drury misplaying his hand as much as it is either a coaching situation or just your player starting to decline at a tough time at your point in kind of the team cycle. So I think we revisit that question, at least for myself, this summer, because he can easily misplay his hand this summer where you need to retool and figure out some different pieces. But overall, when I look at the 2 big moves in season being getting rid of Jacob Trouba's contract when he wanted to stay, finding a way to get rid of him, and bringing in JT Miller, who over the next couple of years, at the very least, and even looking at his point production this season, is a big upgrade over what someone like Philip Hedl was bringing. I do like the in-season moves of at least trying to get something back on track. So as much as it's been a disaster season for the New York Rangers, I don't know if the blame is primarily on Chris Drury.
I'd say the misplaying the hand thing, while I agree with you, Kyle, like generally that he's made out well, Drury, in terms of trades and whatnot. I think the misplaying the hand comes into factor where he sent out this text chain message, hey, all my guys are available. That leaks. It becomes this whole like drama-filled period in their season, and that's when things went sideways on the ice even further than it had already gone. So I feel like the sort of the nuance or the tactic behind the scenes was maybe misplayed as far as, you're an original six market, a ton of media attention. guys like Chris Kreider, who are, icons in the franchise, being on this list of guys who are available, and Trouba, obviously the captain. There's nothing wrong with trying to trade these players, but I feel like maybe just the way things unfolded, it could have been more behind the scenes and kept under wraps. We're not complaining because it created a ton of headlines and some fun and lots to talk about. But I wonder from that perspective if he would like a do-over in terms of like just keeping things a little quieter.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because I think from a transactional standpoint, I mean, there's a reason we kept saying, this team should be in the playoffs, because he pieced together a great on-paper roster. So I think, he didn't misplace hand at all in that regard, but with something like that kind of leaks into the actual team and affects, kind of the makeup and the attitude and everything there, I totally agree that, that's a part that he misplayed. But I think overall, I actually appreciate that answer, because I was thinking you were just going to go a quick no, given how the season's gone. But I don't think it's his fault entirely, which I like. Now, sticking with you, Kyle, this is another fun one, because this team, I wouldn't say it's like the Rangers. I think their expectations were far, far lower. But they just kind of kept on keeping on this season, and it's the Calgary Flames. And they find themselves still a game back of the wild card spot, but it's looking dicey for them to get in. We said they're chasing the Red Hot Blues. And with the situation of this team, do you think that it's safe to say that they're the most directionless team in the NHL this year?
It's a tough superlative to give a team the most directionless.
Yeah.
It's such a backhanded way of describing a team. But for the Calgary Flames, I think it's accurate, at least right now, in terms of being a team that you don't really know what the plan is, where you look over the past couple of years and look at the names that they've traded out, and you think about having all those players on a roster today, and it's probably a team that's contending in the West, but for a bunch of different factors, all those players went out the door. Fair enough. You go into this season expecting probably to sell even more of those assets. I remember we were talking about Rasmus Anderson trades early in the season, and then your team exceeds expectations. Dustin Wolf becomes a potential Hart Trophy nominee the way that he's played this season, certainly in the Calder discussion. And all of a sudden, you're in this wild card race. So you don't end up selling. You're smart that you don't end up buying at the deadline as well, which leaves you in a situation where you let the roster just kind of play out and see how it goes. So in terms of the directionless aspect, it felt like they had a direction coming into this year. And Craig Conroy, the general manager, has let things play out and has done a smart job right now. But they can get off the rails quickly if they decide to try and double down with this group, or go out and spend money in the offseason, or don't try and cash in on certain free agents and whatnot this summer that are coming up in terms of their contracts. So there's a lot of ways that this could go poorly for the Flames. In terms of the directionless aspect, right now it's just tough to see whether they're on that track towards trying to contend or rebuild, and right now they're just kind of hands off the wheel and just kind of see where it goes right now, which I think is the smart way to play it this season. But you got to be smart when it comes to this offseason. You got to be honest with yourselves about where this team is at in terms of truly contending in the playoffs. So in terms of the directionless aspect, I think Calgary Flames are rightfully kind of in that realm as the most directionless team in the NHL right now.
Yeah, and I think directionless, the synonym for it could be like mushy middle, right? Like,
exactly,
are you contending? Are you rebuilding? Or are you like stuck in the middle and you don't have the prospects or the young players to see that future of being, let's say a top 10 team? So I think it's fair. Like Calgary, what is this team going to be in a few years? We don't know. Are they going to go down? Are they going to go up? And if they go up, how far do they go? I feel like Seattle's a really good team here, and Nashville. So Seattle, for similar reasons to Calgary, they don't have star power. They, it seems like this past offseason when they spent money, it might have been like ownership, trying to say, hey, let's make the playoffs. But now they're stuck in the mushy middle. Like, they're not going to get. They're
probably below the mushy middle.
Yeah, that's fair. But are they at the bottom of the standings when they're going to finally get that star? Because Matty Beniers, their big top pick, probably isn't going to get to that level. So there's Seattle, where I go, what's the future there? What's their ceiling? It doesn't seem very high. And then Nashville, for a different reason, where obviously they tried to be contenders this offseason, hasn't worked out. Do they reset in some way, or are they stuck? Does that make them directionless because they're just stuck in mediocrity because they signed all these veterans to long-term contracts? It's not going well. How do you get out of that? Or do you just push forward and hope for the best? So those are two teams that came to mind for me.
And when you're directionless, it's very easy to get on a certain direction. Like, you can make that very clear with a couple of moves. And for the Calgary Flames, you look kind of last summer even, it was a team with direction in terms of rebuilding. When you look at the amount of moves that they had made over the previous calendar year plus, the way that the season has gone in season has kind of put them back into that where are we going. So it's up to the management staff when we get to the summer and they can look back on the season to get back on a certain direction. Whereas right now it's kind of what are you at this stage?
And I mean, I think the comparisons with Seattle and Nashville are great. They're super directionless, but at the very least, they're far closer to the bottom of the standings than Calgary is. And I know, I know our good friend Aiden has always loved to allude to the fact that the Flames haven't had a top 2 pick in however long, because they're either in the playoffs or they're right there. But I mean, at the end of the season, if all 3 of those teams don't make it, 2 are looking a lot better than the other in terms of they're just going to be drafting higher. So I don't exactly blame the Flames for just letting their team do what it's doing, but then it's gonna cost you when it comes to draft time. So it's tough to say. But I mean, hey, this Flames season may be directionless, but you don't have to be when it comes to finding travel deals to Calgary thanks to Skyscanner. Again, check the link in our bio and let them take care of that for you. Last question here for you, John, and this is a fun one. Well, actually, not so fun. Fun police, actually, would be a better way to say it. But we just saw the other night, Kings Bruins, Jeremy Swayman, Darcy Kemper wanted to go. They had a tilt lined up. The refs got in the way. Were they right to spoil that goalie fight? And I'll say, because I remember I saw this happen, and I don't know if you guys remember, I think it was 2 years ago, Fleury Bennington.
Yep.
Would have been an awesome fight. And again,
all-timer.
The refs stepped in. We're starting to see a trend here. Goalie fights are awesome, at least to us. But do you think they were in the right stopping that fight or not?
They shouldn't have. I think they spoiled some fun here.
Thank you.
You know, it could have been like an all-time moment. I mean, you think of like Waugh versus Vernon, Waugh versus Osgood, Hextall fighting like 7 times in his career. Like, there's something
Felix the cat in here. Felix
the
Potvin,
cat.
yeah.
There's something about goalie fights that's so like exhilarating and tantalizing. And if we're being honest, like the fights themselves don't end up, you know, there's not a ton of haymakers thrown, but it's just the idea of these guys in these bulky pads going at it. And, you know, Swayman talking about after how he was doing it like for a reason. He was trying to stick up for his teammate because he thought Kemper was crossing a line. So I like that, where it wasn't just kind of random. There was some reason, some motivation from Swayman's part. And you hit the nail on the head there, Levi, where it's like there's clearly a directive from the league where it's like if goalies are getting involved, the lines people need to get in there and they need to separate, and we don't want to see that. And I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if it's a health and safety thing or if it's just, hey, we don't want this to turn into a circus. But I think those are the type of moments that really sell the game. And I don't know. It just like I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of like, if it was just 2 skaters, defensemen, forwards, and it was the exact same context, would they have let them fight? Probably.
Oh,
so
sure.
They're clearly protecting the goalies for whatever reason, and I don't have any problem with that generally. But in terms of, you know, taking some sort of moment like that away, it's a bit annoying.
I know they're not playing NHL hockey for clicks or for views. Obviously, they're playing hockey to play hockey, but I think from that perspective too, I mean, with the Four Nations and how that started, and just sometimes I know it's dangerous, but you kind of have to feed into the fact that you're the league that lets people fight. And a goalie fight, especially just with where the NHL's at, and it's still top of mind for a lot of people who aren't hockey fans. I mean, goalie fight would have done millions and millions of hits online. So something like that, it's tough to say because you're promoting something that's not great, but at the same time, you know how big that's going to be online. So I don't really know. It's a tough spot.
I think what the Four Nations face-off highlighted was the fighting aspect. Like if it's all emotion and if it's all in the moment, like I think people are okay with that. The problem is when it's completely staged and it's 2 guys who are 6'5", 250, and their only role in the league is to fight, and you're going, what is the point of this? Absolutely. And they're gonna get brain damage and all that. But if it's in the moment, I mean, the league has allowed it. Obviously, you get penalized, but the league has allowed it for decades and decades. That I think if it's spontaneous, I think you should allow it to happen. And obviously, that relates to this instance where they could have let these guys go at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, nonetheless, I think we're not sitting here saying the league's in a bad spot and they need a goalie fight to turn things around. So that's a good thing. But that concludes the wrap around. I'm glad we got all that stuff covered. We got a lot more to cover about the current state of the league and maybe some people to watch. Bringing back a classic segment here, John's NHL Inbox. Let's go to the inbox and see what some people have got for you. And we'll start off with, where are we starting here, John? You tell me. What do I see here? Aiden MIA.
Aiden MIA.
Iceman didn't like that.
We've got some interesting additions here to the inbox. So I'll just read off my phone because my eyes are bad. But the first question I'll tackle. So the NBA, NFL, and MLB thrive on marketing their stars, while hockey is more team-focused. What innovative ideas does the NHL have to market the game and increase viewership? So I'm going to take this in a different direction, and obviously we kind of just touched on it in some sense. But, like, I actually think they're doing a pretty good job of marketing their stars. If you look at it over, you know, the last 5-10 years, where it's been kind of subtle, but I think it's been very effective, where they now have a reality show with Amazon that's going behind the scenes, and it's like, it's fairly unfiltered. I mean, like, there's obviously always edits, but that McDavid moment in the first season where he's yelling at his teammates in the Cup final, I mean, that was something we've never seen before. And then you've got other things coming down the pike in terms of, I don't know if you guys see these videos from team-produced videos when guys are coming off the ice and they get asked questions, and these types of social videos go viral. Like, that's something that wasn't around and was kind of not in the hockey mold not too long ago. You've got even, you know, more behind the scenes stuff being produced by teams in terms of, you know, in the locker room, on the road, that kind of stuff. I think that they're really getting into also the star versus star matchup as far as promoting on broadcasts and on social media, where it's not just Sharks versus Blackhawks, it's Celebrini versus Bedard. I think that the league's really made a shift there in terms of getting out of the completely team-focused mentality and bringing in some sort of mix of team focused and star. And I think Steve Mayer, the president of content for the team, deserves a lot of credit here, where he's become pretty influential in the league office. And I think Bettman really trusts him and trusts his taste. And hey, if we want to do this Amazon series, like, we've got to go full in. We can't over edit this thing. We want it to be raw. And, you know, it's turned out well. They're greenlit for a second season. Have been shooting all year, and we're going to see some Brady Tkachuk action from the Four Nations face-off, which will be some spicy material. So I actually think that they're headed in the right direction, and especially when you think about moving forward, you've got the NHL awards coming up, and instead of doing the traditional kind of boring awards in person, it's going to be more surprising the player that wins with a viral, I guess we'll see if it goes viral, but more of like a video from a fan, from a family member. I think that's a good idea in terms of just doing something different and getting out of this old way of doing things. And then you've got the NHL All-Star Game for next year. Things are up in the air in terms of that. The Four Nations face-off really blew things out of the water, where it's like, okay, maybe we don't need to do what we always did. Maybe we either ditch the All-Star Game in general, or if we do an All-Star weekend, there's no game, it's all skills, it's all fan interactions. I just think that the league has gotten out of its way more than it used to, and is letting its stars speak for themselves. And one thing though that I'll say as a caveat is that I feel like there's a ceiling though with hockey, because there's such a big barrier to entry to playing the game that it's never, I shouldn't say never, but it's gonna be very difficult to get on the same plane as Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA. I just feel like it's a rich person sport at this point, and you need to really change things at the grassroots level, which isn't necessarily the NHL's job, but for this to really take off. But they're making steps.
It's a good point. I do think the direction they've gone with, you're saying, more player focus and stuff, like, one thing that drove me crazy, and it was just the most obvious attempt of them trying to jam the game and showcase it, was just the 1,000 stadium series that we used to get in the Winter Classics and stuff, and it took away from how it started and how beautiful that was. And I think more people are looking back at, like, those Penn Sabres games outside and kind of reminiscing in that than they are at the Kings Ducks game or whatever.
Sure.
So that was something that I'm glad they took a different approach this year and toned those down. And obviously the Four Nations changes everything. That was one of the best ideas probably that they've ever had. So I agree in that, from that standpoint. They're letting the game kind of speak for itself in other ways than doing tons of stuff with it.
Well, one last thing I'll add is that I've really noticed from being in locker rooms and going to the NHL scouting combine every year in Buffalo is that you interacting with the newer generation. The scouting combine is draft eligible players, so they're literally 17 years old. The difference in being comfortable in their own skin is through the roof versus 5-10 years ago. This new generation, they've grown up on their phones. They've grown up watching the NBA and players, you know, being able to express themselves, and we're seeing it with, you know, Austin Matthews in his fashion, or Patrick Laine in his fashion, and the tunnel walkthroughs. Like, I think even though it's hard to see in the moment, I think over the long term, there's been some subtle effective change in terms of making the NHL more of a individual league while keeping what we like about the team-focused aspect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, great question there from Mr. Isaac. Appreciate that. We have another one coming right up, I believe.
Yeah, let's see what we got
Looking
here.
at some more of
So
these.
next we'll go to this goalie question. So the question, Binnington is not Olympic starter quality, and the days of Patrick Waugh and Carey Price are gone. Which Canadian goalie prospects do you think can bring back days of those Hockey Hall of Fame quality goalies? So I hate to break it to the reader here, but there's no sure things coming for Canada. Canada's goaltending development system is broken in terms of where it ranks in the world. You know, probably at this point producing the 5th most and 5th best beyond, you know, Finland, Russia, Sweden, the Americans. We're pretty far behind. That said, there are a couple of potential guys who, if they meet their absolute ceiling, could do something special and get to closer to Price and Waugh than Binnington, but those are really high heights here. So Sebastian Cossa is the first guy that comes to mind. He's 22, really strong AHL numbers for Detroit's farm team. Big, athletic, competitive, kind of has all the tools that you want in an NHL starter. He's on that trajectory. Does he ultimately get there? We'll see, but he has the pedigree as a former first rounder, and there's been no major setbacks in his development. So he's one, I would say, that is worthy of the top of the list. I'll have you, Kyle, chime in on a draft-eligible player here, but one guy I wanted to highlight who isn't a prospect, but who is relatively young, is Mackenzie Blackwood. So 28 years old, again, not 19 here, and so it doesn't necessarily answer the question here directly, but I think he's one to keep an eye on as far as if you talk to someone who knows goaltending, you know, a goalie coach, someone who's, you know, kind of obsessed with goalies from a media perspective, reporting perspective, they drool over this guy's size, his athleticism, his technique, his flexibility. Like, you name it, he's a very toolsy goalie. And he has that extension in Colorado, so he finally has some stability. There's that spot open on the Olympic team next year, potentially. I think that Blackwood is a guy to keep an eye on as far as he has a potential to become a superstar in the NHL. Does he get there, or does he just kind of end up in like the top 15 of the league? It's hard to say, but even though he's 28, I think there's still some runway there for him to really take off.
Yeah, and when we look at some guys coming up now in this draft class, there's a couple guys actually that are intriguing. Joshua Ravensbergen is everything that you want in the goalie prospect. The big goaltender, athletic in the crease, has started a couple years in the WHL. Looks like he's on track to be a first-round draft pick this year. A guy that has gone from not really even on a notable radar in the WHL draft to being a guy that could be the first goalie off the board this year. But again, we're talking about goaltenders that are being drafted now, and it is such a wild card when we're talking about 17, 18-year-old goaltenders. The other one I want to mention for this upcoming draft is Jack Ivankovic. He was on the World Junior roster. He was actually the backup for Canada at the World Juniors here. He was excellent at the Hlinka Gretzky as well. He's more in that Dustin Wolf mold, where it doesn't look like he's going to be a first-rounder, probably not even a second-rounder, because he's like 6 foot, 5'11". So the team that takes a chance on him in the draft could be rewarded, but he doesn't have that size makeup that a Ravensbergen does. That is going to make him the exciting first round pick. But when you look at his pedigree in terms of his performance, he's been lights out everywhere he's played. So Ivankovic is a guy to keep an eye on. But again, we talk about these group of prospects. And when you're talking about the Carey Price top 10 pick, when you're talking about the Patrick Waughs, Martin Brodeurs, Roberto Luongos, all those guys who were elite prospects came up and were elite goaltenders like right away, there's nobody in that mold right here. And we talk about Cossa off the top. He might not even be the best goaltender prospect with the Detroit Red Wings when you talk about Trey Augustine at Michigan State. So it's like, when we're talking about those as the top end guys, and they might not even be the number one in their own farm system. Obviously, Trey Augustine and Cossa are 2 top 5 goaltender prospects in hockey right now, so it's a little unfair to say. But it's a situation where, look, you've got the Binningtons, the Blackwoods, and everything. There's no savior coming for Canada. It looks like it's going to be very much the same for at least this next stretch, unless there's a guy that surprises.
I think Sure, you blame Canada's development system, but I think that as a whole, we need to make being a goalie cool again in Canada.
Yeah.
Maybe we're getting greedy because we've got like a surplus of forwards and great defensemen, and everyone wants to be scoring goals, but maybe that's where it starts. You never know. It starts with the parents when they introduce their kids to the sport of hockey, being like, go get in the pipes. Like, being goalie's really cool.
Yeah,
It'd
and
be really
speaking of the sport being expensive, I mean,
Yeah,
part of the reason
that's
why
true.
parents don't want their kids to be goalies is because of
A lot of
the
money on
price,
those
right? They
pads.
grow. We got to get new pads, and so that could be part of it too.
Yeah, no, it's true. Well, it's fun talking goalie prospects, and we're going to stick in the prospect vein here because we've got the Frozen Four coming up. So I'm going to throw it to you, Kyle, and you can give us kind of a breakdown on the guys to watch during this Frozen Four tournament. I mean, with it coinciding with the college basketball, it's just an awesome time of the year if you're a tournament fan in general. But a lot of great players playing the Frozen Four this year. So who do we have to keep an eye on?
Yeah, it's an awesome time of the year for college sports. Like, we just had the women's Frozen Four wrap up.
Yeah.
An insane championship game where Kirsten Sims ties it up on
Yeah,
a
the
penalty shot with 19 seconds left in regulation. And then she
crazy.
wins it in overtime. If you're not familiar with her, she's a name to watch. She's going to be a stud for a long time in women's hockey. But let's talk about the men's side of the bracket because that's starting up later this week. And I want to highlight 4 guys who could be playing in the NHL on playoff teams potentially this time next week, depending on how things go this week. So it's the opening part of the region. You've got the kind of 4 brackets that are the 4 that make up the overall 16-team tournament. One team comes out of each region, and then they go on to the Frozen Four later down the road. And so if a team is eliminated this week, those players can then sign NHL contracts as soon as this weekend when they're eliminated, versus if they move on to the Frozen Four, move on to the championship game, we're talking about guys that might only get a couple of NHL games before going into the playoffs. So it's a big difference between being eliminated now versus making it all the way into the Frozen Four. So let's talk about some of those guys that can make some impacts. Top of the board, easy pick, Ryan Leonard of the Washington Capitals. 8th overall pick, leads the NCAA in goals with 29, had 31 last year. We saw him at the World Juniors, just a fantastic player. I've said it a few times, probably my favorite prospect in all of hockey right now among the drafted players. He plays with such an energy, such a tenacity, and he's a wicked goal scorer and offensive player. And when you look at the Capitals and the impact that he could have, obviously he's on a number 1 team in Boston College, so he's not expected to be available this time next week. But upsets happen. Boston College didn't win Hockey East, so it's something where an upset could happen here. Ryan Leonard fits so perfectly into their top 9 when you think about him potentially replacing like a Taylor Radish on their third line and lining up with like a veteran like Lars Eller, maybe even pushing higher in the lineup depending on how he does right away. That's a guy that when we talk about the Capitals being one of the top teams in the NHL right now, not a deadline edition, but they're going to get him whether it's next week or later into April, and he's going to make an impact in my opinion. I think he's an absolute stud. But Boston College in their region actually has the defending national champions in the Denver Pioneers. So it means that one of at least Leonard or this next guy, Zeev Buium, will be available to sign this time next week. And Zeev Buium, a Minnesota draft pick, I was surprised he fell as far as he did in the draft. I thought he was a surefire top 10 guy based off of the season he had with the national championship winning team and on Team USA at the World Juniors. He goes outside the top 10. Minnesota trades up 1 pick to get him, and he looks like an absolute stud on the back end. We'll see how his impact goes when he gets to the Wild. Denver is a team that you would expect to lose this weekend, just having to potentially go up against Boston College in that regional final. And so if it is Buium that ends up being eliminated with Denver there and he's available to sign, being a defenseman that makes an impact on a playoff team is a lot harder to do than a forward you can stick on a third line or a fourth line. But Buium has that offensive two-way ability where if he does get eliminated and he has 7 or 8 games to adjust to the NHL rather than 2 or 3 if he's signing later into April, if Denver's able to go on to the Frozen Four again, that's a big difference. Where you look at the Wild on the back end and can he replace a Declan Chisholm or a John Merrill or whoever it is on the back end?
Probably.
Would not shock me whatsoever. And so when you think about him joining a back end that already has Brock Faber as a young stud, and then they have David Jiricek coming up, like that's an exciting back end. But I talk about Leonard and Buium. One of those guys for sure will be available to sign this time next week because only one of those 2 teams can move on to the Frozen Four. So let's get on to a couple other guys that aren't as guaranteed. Jimmy Snuggerud with the Minnesota Golden Gophers. We kind of thought he might be in the AHL or NHL this season because he's in his junior year with the Golden Gophers. He's had 3 straight 20-goal seasons since joining the Gophers, And we kind of thought he would do like the Matt Nyes thing where he has a really good freshman year, goes back for a sophomore year, and then turns pro. He elected to return to Minnesota for that third junior season. He was great at the World Juniors a couple years ago. Is a guy that, again, talking about a Blues team, could step into a bottom six there as a goal-scoring type, a bit of a hard-nosed player at times, and could give that team a bit of juice in the bottom six for a Blues team that could really need it. So he's a guy, looking at the Blues and kind of their push right now, how hot they've been recently, he's a guy that I think could fit in that lineup pretty seamlessly when he becomes available. And then the last one is a bit more of a long shot in terms of making an impact on the playoff roster right now. But I look at Isaac Howard and what he could potentially bring to the Tampa Bay Lightning, a late first-round pick. If you remember back at the 2022 draft, the all-white suit, tons of swagger.
Drip.
And he plays with that swagger. He transferred to Michigan State after a bit of a tough freshman season, and he's been great the past 2 seasons. He actually leads the NCAA in points per game this season with 1.42. He's been an absolute stud with the Spartans, who have gone back-to-back as Big Ten champions. And Michigan State expects to move on to the Frozen Four, so that might change the calculus on whether Howard could get into the playoff lineup. But talk about injecting some kind of like swagger and offensive ability into the Lightning's bottom six there. You think about a left wing spot, maybe replacing Gage Gonsalves on that third line with Nick Paul or Yanni Gord and Oliver Bjorkstrand. And all of a sudden, you have that fun offensive player injected into that bottom six, which right now looks a little bland. And that all of a sudden is a bit of a wild card for a Lightning team who could make some noise come playoff time. So those are 4 guys I've really got an eye on when it comes to guys who could make an impact for these playoff teams. There's a bunch of other guys who can make impacts. I think about Sam Renzel with the Blackhawks, who's probably going to play games at the end of this year with the Golden Gophers, a bunch of other players like that. But I wanted to highlight 4 guys who not only will probably sign NHL contracts and play NHL games at the end of the season, but could be making impacts on playoff teams in a couple weeks' time.
Yeah, I think it's such an underrated aspect of the NHL where you can just, maybe you're sputtering down the stretch, and you need some rejuvenation, you can just bring in like an elite college player. I think it's great. Do you think, I will say, these guys playing the Frozen Four, do you think some of them start to get ahead of themselves and maybe forget about the tournament that they're currently in, and they're looking at that deal and they're like, oh, I could be, Ryan Leonard, I could be out there on a cup contending team right now if I wanted to? How do you think that plays out for them?
I think it's easy to get in that mindset if you allow yourself to.
Yeah.
But I think this group, especially when you look at some of the choices that they've made, basically all of those guys could have chosen to turn pro before the season and elected not to. Ryan Leonard easily could have joined the Capitals last year even for their playoff run and decided not to. He wanted to go back and try and win a national championship. Zeev Buium, he was drafted, so maybe that's a bit of a different circumstance, but he's trying to go back-to-back as a national champion. Like, I look at that list, Jimmy Snuggerud as well, a guy that very easily could have turned pro and elected not to. So I think for this group of players, maybe it's a bit different for maybe some unrestricted free agents and maybe some guys who are trying to decide, are you going to return to school or are you going to turn pro? And if you do turn pro, who are you going to sign with? And all of that craziness going on, maybe that can be a distraction for some of those guys. But I think for this group of players especially, they're focused on trying to win a national championship. And obviously it sucks if you lose this weekend and you don't even make it to the Frozen Four and get to play for that national championship. But if you do lose, you have the silver lining of you're playing in the show in 6 days' time. So have fun with that.
Yeah,
so
it's a bit of a win-win.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned about them getting ahead of themselves, but it is clearly a factor that will probably come into play for some 19, 20-year-old kids.
Yeah, no, exciting. Very excited for it and looking forward to it. So it was a great recap. Appreciate that. Everyone watching at home, you know who to look out for now. We've got one thing left to do on this show, our favorite part of the show, Top Shelf Trivia.
All right.
Hopefully the last one here we'll have where it's just a one. Well, actually, John will be away for a bit, but
it's been a lot of head-to-head.
Head-to-head. We're really getting to know each other here. And so I figured this is something we haven't done yet. Something that I was telling you guys pre-show. I actually came up with this idea myself.
The mad scientist.
Back in the day, maybe my one claim to fame here. Grid trivia. Have you guys done grid trivia before? The immaculate grid. All right, so John's a little bit...
Of course John doesn't know.
I'm old.
He's behind the 8 ball. Yeah, no, you crossword puzzles? You familiar with those?
I'm doing every morning now.
But we're doing good trivia. So basically how it's going to work, and the teams I've selected for this, all Canadian, because we have a great season of Canadian teams and how they've been performing this year. I mean, we've got, I think 5 in the playoffs right now with 6 and 7 just on the outside looking in. So I went 3 Eastern Conference teams on one side, 3 Western Conference teams on the other. You need to give me a player who has played for the corresponding team. So you see top left, Toronto, Winnipeg. Give me a guy who's played for that. So we'll have John start since he's clearly
can I pick whatever?
Not his season.
Square?
You can pick whatever, and we're just going to see who can fill out the most boxes. So this should be interesting.
Not tic-tac-toe style. We're just going as many as you can.
We're just going fill the board. No tic-tac-toe in this one. That's a good idea. We'll do that next time. So John, anywhere on the board here, can you name a player that fits anywhere into this grid?
So the player is on one of the rosters right now.
No, it doesn't have to be active. It doesn't have to be
just
on
any
the team.
player that's played for both
has
teams.
played for both teams. Yeah.
Oh man, that still doesn't help me too much. Let's see here. I'm gonna go Montreal, Calgary.
Okay.
Who do we got there?
I should get my phone out to do some stat checking.
Let's see. Calgary, Ottawa.
You know it's good when you have the blank board and you're trying to pull.
Yeah.
That's always tough.
That's not good.
Come on, give me like an old school name or something.
I'm trying to think of an old school name. Nothing's coming to me. Let's see. Toronto, Edmonton. Oh, I'll go Connor Brown.
There we go. Connor Brown, Zach Hyman would have worked.
I was going to say not even Zach Hyman.
Yeah, Toronto, Edmonton is correct, John. 1-0 John. On to Kyle. I have a feeling I might know where this is going to go with how I feel like Kyle's got some quiet confidence over there.
So John was trying to think old school. I'm going to go as recent as possible because he was a deadline ad. Toronto, Winnipeg, Luke Shen.
There we go. Luke Shen. Very nicely done. Did play for both those teams. I'm sure there's a few grids here. He could just fill the whole board.
Yeah.
Been everywhere. All right, 1-1. Back to you, John. 9 total tiles, so someone's going to get to 5 here.
Hopefully.
Yeah, let's hope. But where are you thinking here, John?
Montreal, Winnipeg. Actually, you know what? Oh, no, never mind. I was thinking I could go Montreal, Toronto, but I can't.
That would have been fun.
I feel like Toronto, Calgary, I should have one. Dion Phaneuf.
Dion Phaneuf. There we go. Nice.
Okay.
And I was thinking.
Sorry, I'm taking forever with
No,
this.
no,
My
it's all
mind is
good.
just going
No, it's okay. You haven't done one.
I was
of these
thinking
before.
Nazem Kadri.
I was thinking.
Oh, yeah, that is a good one.
Yeah, I was thinking Matt Stajan. Shout out Matt Stajan.
Ooh,
Old,
very
nice.
good shout.
old school pull there. Okay, 2-1 John. Back to Kyle.
All
You
right.
got something for us? No more Leafs. Leafs are off the board, right?
Yep. He's eligible for 2 of these, so I'm gonna go with the Montreal Calgary one of Sean Monahan.
Sean Monahan. That's correct. And I'll say, I won't let you use that for Montreal Winnipeg now. Sean Monahan's off the board.
Okay. Ottawa, Edmonton. Who did I have there in my head? And now I've just forgotten. Ottawa, Edmonton. I feel like oh man, was it Montreal, Edmonton? Your Monahan threw me off because I started thinking about him.
Sorry.
Oh! Now I know who it was. It was Cody Ceci. So sorry, Ottawa, Edmonton, Cody Ceci.
Cody Ceci. That's correct. There we go. John's getting
Nice.
hot here. 3-2. Nobody's had a miss yet, which is nice to see.
Yeah.
So back to you, Kyle.
Winnipeg, Montreal, Tyler Toffoli.
That's correct.
Oh, that is
That's
a good
correct.
one.
Another guy who could probably get on.
Yeah, he was
Quite a
also
few
one that
boards.
was Calgary, Montreal.
Yeah,
I was debating
that's correct.
which one to do for both.
That's
of
correct.
those.
All right, 3-3. I'm gonna instill a timer now because we're getting down to the wire.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'll give you guys 15 seconds per.
Okay.
So we'll see if somebody crumbles. So back to you, John. Now 15 seconds on the clock.
Joel Edmondson, Montreal, Edmonton.
Joel
Did he
Edmondson.
play for Edmonton?
I'll have a look for
I
you.
don't know if he did.
Didn't jump into my brain right away. I'll say that much.
I think
we're
it might
gonna
be
give it a
wrong.
Check. Carolina, just Montreal. No Edmonton.
All right, that's an X.
No Edmonton for Edmonton. Back to you, Kyle. Chance to take the lead.
Brett Kulak, Edmonton, Montreal.
I don't even have to check. I know that one's correct.
That is a
Brett
good
Kulak, great pull. You know what's funny is I went to Maple Leaf Square a couple of years ago and had a grid similar, and we got a Brett Kulak pull.
Hey,
Nice.
nice.
Exact
That one
same
literally, that
crossover.
one just popped in my mind.
So random, but that's correct. All right, back to John. Trivia on the line. Can you come through? You have either the Sens or the Jets, or the Sens and the Flames.
Yeah, the Sens are really giving me trouble.
Yeah,
here.
nothing's coming out to me right here. I'll tell you that.
Ottawa and Calgary.
Give you 10 seconds.
Calgary, who's on Calgary?
5,
I'm just gonna say Jerome McGinley, even though it's not right.
Nice.
Jerome McGinley, I do not think he suited up for the Sens.
No.
Back to Kyle for the win. You
Okay,
have it.
this one I need a ruling on.
Okay.
Winnipeg Jets only or franchise history?
Oh wow.
Because I
Oh.
want to say Marian Hossa for the
Oh,
Atlanta
wow.
Ottawa.
I didn't
Atlanta.
think about that. I think I would say just Jets.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
perfectly fair.
I think they need to be a Donda Jets.
Which in that
jersey.
case, we're gonna have to dig deep. Let's see.
Give me 10 seconds.
Winnipeg, Calgary.
This is a tricky one. Nothing's popping up to me either.
Yeah, no, I'll pass.
5 seconds. Back to
You got
John.
Ottawa, Calgary, Cam Talbot.
Cam Talbot.
Oh.
That's correct.
Did he play
right?
for the Sens?
Yeah,
He did,
yeah,
right?
that one
I'm
season,
almost
yeah.
positive.
I was literally like, who's a goalie that's been around?
Nice. Nice.
Yes.
Yeah, you got 32
Winnipeg,
games
Ottawa.
in. All right. Winnipeg, Ottawa for all the marbles. It's Kyle's turn, but we'll see. We'll give him about 15 seconds again. This is good. This is, I'm glad this is going how it went. Winnipeg, Ottawa.
I don't think he played for Winnipeg. Derek Brassard.
Derek Brassard. let me
That's
give it a
not
check.
bad. I think he.
Let me
yeah.
give it a
I don't think he
check.
did.
It's not.
Not even for 10 games after a deadline.
I
or
was hoping
Yeah.
something like that.
Did I spell Derek wrong here? Oops.
Derick.
Brassard, there he is. Bear with me, Derek Brassard. A lot of teams here. No Winnipeg.
Oh,
No Winnipeg. Back to John.
I'm gonna go with another deadline guy that always gets moved. Mike Sillinger. Ottawa
oh
and
my
Winnipeg.
goodness.
Mike Sillinger.
This is a total Hail Mary here. Just a guy who's played for I think 12
He's
teams.
played for a lot of teams here. We have Ottawa. I don't think we have Winnipeg. I don't think we have Winnipeg on the list.
Give us some names.
Yeah, give us
Solve
some
tie,
names.
people in the comments.
We'll call it a
Let
tie.
you drop below. Honestly, the guy that stuck out the most to me, and it's crazy that this is him, Clark MacArthur.
Oh, wow.
man.
Clark MacArthur, and I think he probably barely played for the Jets, right?
Yeah.
Because he was an Atlanta guy.
Yeah,
I think.
exactly.
That
So
must have
him,
transitioned.
Peter Bondra, but he would have been.
Wow. What
Would
did
he
I
have been
guess?
Jets?
That
or
would have been in
Thrashers?
Atlanta.
Yeah. Dylan DeMello.
Oh, yeah.
We
yeah,
should've gotten
yeah.
that. We
DeMello
should've
was a
gotten
good one.
that.
Yep.
I mean, after that,
It's
it
modern.
like Johnny Oduya somehow. I wouldn't have guessed
one.
that.
Yeah.
Nate
DeMello was gettable.
Nate
Yep.
Thompson, but honestly,
Nate
valiant effort.
Thompson. Wow.
Valiant effort. I appreciate you guys having a crack at that. And that was fun. I like the good.
That was a
trivia,
good one.
so
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
see maybe if we're ever doing 3 people, we'll see how that kind of shakes out. But that's all the time we've got. Great episode again. Love talking this time of the season in hockey. I mean, just in a great spot right now. So I'm glad we got to catch up. We'll be back on Thursday to do it again. But for now, I'm Levi Smith, John Matisz, Kyle Cushman. This has been Top Shelf, presented by Skyscanner. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.